Hey, Eli. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Super excited for today. Everyone else joining us, good afternoon and welcome to Plain Speak, where we explore the dynamic intersection of e-commerce and customer experience against the backdrop of all exciting new tech and AI developments and customer support in 2024. I'm your host, Liz, and welcome to today's episode. I am super thrilled to have a very special guest with us, Eli Weiss. Eli is the VP of Retention Advocacy at Yotpo, where he is pioneering the future of customer retention and engagement. With a decade of experience in building and operating early-stage startups, Eli has become renowned for his expertise in the convergence of customer experience and all-important customer retention. Eli's impressive career includes leadership roles at notable DTC brands such as Jones Road Beauty and OLIPOP, which have consistently put customers first. Now he's bringing his wealth of experience to the other side, the tech side, helping Yotpo empower brands to grow their direct-to-consumer businesses through captivating experiences that spark and sustain lasting customer loyalty. If you shop online, you've probably been a client or customer in some way. And in addition to his role at Yotpo, Eli is also an angel investor at Portless, a strategic advisor at Pretty Damn Quick, and an ambassador at Gorgeous. He's an influential voice in the customer experience community, is the editor and creator of the All Things CX and Retention Weekly newsletter. Sign up on the link we'll drop in the comments, and has been instrumental in transforming the way that brands interact with their customers. Eli, excited to hear about your journey in your own words. Thank you again in joining us today on our podcast.
Thank you, Liz.
So Eli, with all of that, in your words, give us a brief introduction into your career, your journey, your significant milestones, and what's brought you to today at Yotpo.
Yeah. Well, let me give you the quick 30-second spiel that might be more like a couple of minutes, but
take as long as you need. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Orthodox Jewish world, number 2 of 10 children, didn't have a traditional upbringing at all, didn't graduate high school, didn't go to college. I started traveling in my early 20s with points and miles. When I should have been in college, I was traveling the world, and all of a sudden I'm 21 years old without a clue what I wanted to do. I do my kind of GED diploma equivalent. And I realized that startups are probably the easiest way to kind of jump and improve myself if I don't want to go the college route. So I started in the luggage space, was at a startup in like a Kickstarter brand in the luggage space for 4 years. During that time, I kind of started my own startup on the side that ended up failing, and I learned a ton there. Moved back to the US in 2018. I was living in Israel between 2014 and 2018, moved back in 2018 and kind of kept working at that luggage company. In 2020, the company closes down, and I realized that I have spent so much time working in the luggage company. I did CX, I did retention, I ran the Amazon and Facebook ads, I was doing ops and logistics, I was doing all the things, but I had no real marketable experience because I was just, doing the jack of all trades. Yes. So I applied to probably 85 to 90 companies in 2019 to 2020 and got almost 0 interviews. Started kind of thinking, okay, if I had to choose one thing that I narrow my focus on, CX to me was super interesting because it felt like I was able to be better than most without trying very hard. It felt like it was a skill that I had, that I was able to deeply understand what customers were saying, read between the lines, understand what great experience looks like holistically. And it felt like the bar was low. I got a job at a company called Simulate, which was then called Nugs. Was there for a short period of time until I got pulled by OLIPOP in the early days. I joined OLIPOP in 2020 as the first director of CX and one of the first employees on the e-com side of the business. Saw OLIPOP go from 17 employees to 75, nearing 9 figures. And kind of after almost 2 years there, got pulled into Jones Road. Jones Road was the first role where I was focusing, senior director of customer experience and retention. So I was focusing on both of those things. Built out a strong CX team, was building retention with my friend Joanne, and spent almost 2 years there kind of building, and realized, had like a midlife crisis towards the end of my time there, where I realized that I kept trying to stretch myself in the ways that I wasn't
Midlife,
excited
quarter
about.
life.
I know, definitely more quarter than mid, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I was stretching myself in the wrong ways, and I was trying to be so good at the things that I wasn't inherently great at. So I was taking so much time to be great at spreadsheets, and turns out I could live the rest of my life and never touch a spreadsheet and be okay with that. And I was like, why am I stretching my brain in the wrong places? Why don't I just triple down on the things I'm good at? Part of the journey of leaving Jones was meeting a bunch of different founders and trying to get their point of view on, do I go agency? Do I go fractional? Do I go to a different brand? And Tomer from Yotpo was like, we were interconnected. Like Tomer was probably one of the first 10 subscribers to my newsletter. Like, I don't think people know this. Like Tomer and I we had mutual admiration.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
loved what he was building. As a customer, I churned Yotpo twice, so I definitely had gripes with Yotpo. I had some tweets before taking the job at Yotpo. This was
So you
like,
kept engaging.
it was not a traditional move for me. First conversation Tomer and I had, I said, he's like, you're an entrepreneur without risk tolerance. And I said, you're 100% right. I love building. He said, would you ever consider SaaS? I said, absolutely not. We then had like a few more conversations, and I realized that he was giving me the ability to jump in and spend some time to see what impact I can have, and the ability to work at a company of this size and this scale, but still have that generalist kind of role here was life-changing, is life-changing for me to be able to kind of sit on the inside and work to bring the company back towards the market. Like, I'm the ICP, I'm the person they're trying to sell to. So I can sit with CS, I can sit with sales, I can sit with marketing, and kind of bring the customer pain points into the room, which again, Liz, is so similar to CX, right? Like a good CX person says, like, I am the customer. Like, I'm the customer sitting in this chair. So that's what I'm doing here at Yotpo. It's been like 9 months, and it's been fun and challenging and life-changing. And that's kind of my foray from luggage guy to CX to SaaS.
Wow. Okay, we get a lot of non-traditional backgrounds of people who sort of stumble into CX, but your story, especially with that early upbringing and traveling the world, is really, really unique. And in a lot of ways, I'd love to unpack some of that a little bit more. But it sounds like your current role is kind of like the best of all worlds. You have infrastructure, you have support, but you get to be that jack of all trades within the org, and you get to leverage. This is, I feel like, a theme that came up a lot here. You get to leverage what you're really naturally good at and what you bring to the table and triple down on that.
It took me so many years. It took me like 10 plus years to realize that. And again, part of it is the background you come from, where if I'm in this world, I almost always will feel like an imposter because I don't have the same credibility or college degree or expertise or experience that people near me have. And some of that just made me, the imposter syndrome made me want to learn everything that everyone else knew. And I spent so many years trying to learn how Facebook ads work. And so many years to try to mess around in a spreadsheet to figure out the contribution margin for X, Y, and Z, and to build out this incredible like forecast model. And then turns out I can live my entire life without ever doing a forecast model and be okay with it. And I said to myself, like, why can't I just find someone that will do the things that I'm terrible at, or find people that can help with the things I'm terrible at, the same way a founder would, right? Like, a lot of founders they're okay being good at certain things, and the things you need to learn. For me, I think what was interesting is it's very rare for somebody like me to find an opportunity like this at a company this size, with scale this size. And it was, this was Tomer and Yotpo leadership saying, we'll create something that highlights your skills and a role that challenges you in all the right ways. If you asked me 5 years ago what I'd be doing today, I certainly couldn't predict this. So I'll give the universe 2 points on that. Yeah.
So tribe and championship are super, super important. But in order to live the dream, it sounds like step one is figuring out what the dream is and what you're really good at. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, especially against the backdrop of 2024, where I think a lot of people are seeing a lot of change in career and tools and career pathing. How did you, so you said early on that you started to realize that having been able to develop that deep empathy for the customer, that seemed to be something you were just naturally good at. How did you identify that? And then walk me through that journey of really saying, okay, it's okay for me to like triple down on that?
It's a great question. So I think a good example of this is if you talk to any, like, and you probably see this a lot on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's insufferable, but when a growth marketer will be like, "Wow, your Facebook ads suck," or like, "Wow, what you're doing here just like makes no sense," right? When sometimes people can see something and they feel like they can see clearer than most of the people around them. And I don't think that's an extra special. I think everyone has that around one or two things in their life that they feel like, okay, I get this better than most. For some, it's science. For some, it's playing basketball. Like everyone has something inherently where they feel like they can be better than most with less effort. And I think I spent most of my childhood being told, like, if you want to be the best, you have to work the hardest. And if you want to be the what, and it's ingrained in definitely the world where I came from, is like you got to just put in the work to be the best. And I learned early in my career that I'm not like, yes, now I work very, 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 very many hours and very hard. I wasn't always like that. I spent years of my life, like in my early 20s, I spent years doing almost nothing other than traveling. Like I'm very good. I'm very good at doing nothing. And I realized early that the things that feel like they aren't work are the things I'm naturally better. Wake up in the morning, I'm better than most. And that was reading between the lines. Like I realized I'm an introvert. I'd rather be at home, but when I'm out, I feel like I can see 3 or 4 volleys ahead of the conversation. Like I can see what people want. I understand human psychology. I have a ton of empathy. I have decently high IQ that makes up for maybe slightly less IQ than some of the sharper people. That's my skill set. And with CX, it felt like, Zappos and Chewy, these legendary brands, are building what to me felt somewhat basic, right? Like, yes, obviously it costs a lot of money to have a team within the US that's answering the phone 24 hours a day. But at the core, somebody spending their hard-earned money and getting a decent experience better than they expected isn't rocket science.
Yeah.
And even at the luggage brands, like we were years delayed on a Kickstarter backing, and they were struggling. Like, what do we tell these customers? How do we send follow-ups? And me, day one with zero experience in CX, I was like, oh, here's exactly what I would tell them. And I write the email, and it resonates and it does well. And I was like, well, that felt way easier than it should have compared to the way the other people were talking about this issue. And I think that was early. Like day one, I was like, okay, I can talk on the phone with a company that's delayed on my order, and they can be telling me a lot of things. And halfway through, I was like 16, and halfway through on the call, I'd say, if you just told me you're sorry and you appreciate my patience, we could have ended this call 10 minutes ago. Like we're both screaming back and forth about like, I just want to feel valued. And I think and I wasted a lot of time, Liz. I wasted a lot of time on saying like, well, CX is not really a sexy job and it doesn't pay a ton. So like, I need to get really good at ops. And my dad said I'd be really good at sales. And people that are in Y are making a lot of money. And I wasted a lot of years of my career trying to be everything to everyone, including my early days of like, well, I want to learn everything about finance. Well, I want to learn everything about email marketing and design. And yes, being a generalist was helpful, but the lack of clarity wasn't really a lack of clarity. It was procrastination around the inevitable, which was, this is the thing you're good at. And then try to find things like the reason why I'm good at my job today is because it has elements of CX, which is deeply understanding what the customer actually wants, the pain points they have, bring that into marketing, bring that into CS, bring that into sales. I still have that. The reason why I'm good at my job here is because I can consume a lot of things from a lot of different customers and synthesize that to the right person. And then say like, hey, maybe we should do this instead. And that's all CX.
I love that. It's a CX on multiple levels. It feels like what I'm hearing you say is find your superpower and then find where you can change the world with your superpower, which I think to me, sort of in the traditional way of maybe career pathing and career advising, it's a little bit more, hey, what do you want to do in 30 years? And then let's try and step that back and figure out all of the skills you need to learn to get there versus what's your superpower? Okay, where can we change the world?
Isn't it? I would venture to say that a lot of that is because at the age of 18 to 24, we're told that you have to make the decision for the rest of your life by the classes you take and the college you choose. And the college you chose was based on your age 14 to age 18 in high school. Like, I think it's engineered that way, where if you don't make a decision, like if you want to go to medical school, you probably should decide that when you're 15, because your pre-med has to be thoughtful and your high school grades, like, and my wife is the other, like my wife's in med school now, and seeing her career, and her career has to be that way because of what she chose. And I think that's the reason why I saw this differently early was I didn't have the luxury of going to college. So I didn't have any kind of like, this is what I chose. Like that sunken cost fallacy is real, right? If you spend 4 years in like as an econ major or as a finance major, for you to come out and decide you want to go into marketing is challenging. But if you don't have those 4 years, right?
Yeah, we should connect offline. One of my closest friends actually did a whole PhD and then scrapped it, went back to med school 10 years later. So there might be some interesting parallels to talk through there. But no, that's such a good point. And I know we're getting way off track, but I think it actually plays so well in here because, okay, so you do customer experience, you started with experience and service, and you now do retention, but retention for SaaS as well. Can you talk a little bit about the journey there, and then maybe how you see the interconnection between CX and retention and how that plays out from a customer and a brand and company perspective?
It's a good question. I'll say I spend less of my time on actual Yotpo retention than I do on kind of like broader brand marketing and brands. But I will say the convergence of retention and CX kind of came naturally for me, where I realized, CX was definitely not hot in 2014, 2015, 2016. And retention was kind of the same. Like if you look back, and this is not that long ago, I'm not, like I had people in the comments on Twitter the other day saying like, oh my gosh, you call that the old days? I'm like, sorry, Brian, I didn't know you're 60. That's okay. But I'm sorry that I'm young. But to me, like the early days of retention were CRM manager, email marketer, kind of just like one track, send a lot of emails, hopefully drive sales. And as that kind of became more and more mature, we saw SMS become a channel, but still retention was viewed as like growth team gets the customer. Now we have a whole nother team that spams them until they come and repurchase. And there's never been like a connective tissue in like, well, maybe the hardest part of retention is acquiring the right customer, right? Because like if you acquire the wrong customer for 10 cents instead of acquiring the right one for $10, I could spend 6 months to try to get them back and they won't come back because they shouldn't have bought it the first time. So I think retention and growth, kind of that world together, we saw pretty early on. CX and retention, I think, is interesting because CX is obviously a core of retention, right? Like if you don't have great customer experience, you're probably not going to stick around and come back unless the product is God's gift, which is like, think maybe Apple. Like you can have a shitty experience with Apple, you'll still come back. That's a very rare example. Exactly. But few and far in between. As a CPG / like direct to consumer brand, you need to take experience seriously. But even on the retention side, like so much of retention comes from deeply understanding your customers. Yeah. So for example, by understanding why customers hate X product, right? If I know they hate this cleanser because it makes their skin feel dry, I can actually use that as an objective handling pre-purchase and even post-purchase of like, hey, educate you how to use the product properly. Hey, educate you that if you think this might make your skin dry, it's actually not the case. Give you examples from customers. So I think there's so much connective tissue between understanding why people stay and why people leave, pulling that from customers, using that in retention. And then the other ways is again, kind of like great retention comes from great customer experience. They should sit close together, but I think retention probably has more to learn from CX than CX has to learn from retention. And that's kind of, to me, how those universes came together.
Makes a lot of sense because it does feel like for a lot of recent history, it feels like they existed in different silos, right? Marketing was very, very quantitative, very numbers driven, and then you pass it over to CX, and CX is like a room full of people, right?
Yes.
And I think one of the exciting things with, this isn't even really AI, but I think the accessibility of data that we're seeing in 2024 and the ability to parse larger amounts of it and structure it more easily, I'm really excited to see how these two sort of like actually glue together and close the loops on data stories.
Yeah, no, I fully agree.
Really interesting. Very cool. So then I know we've talked a lot about career in this conversation, which is really, I think, so unique in terms of where you find yourself today. When you think about your transition, right, from traveling a ton, to getting your GED, to being like, all right, DTC brand startups, here we go. If you went back, what would you sort of tell yourself if you could talk to yourself 10 or 15 years ago? What are the challenges, tips? What do you want to maybe spend more time on, spend less time on?
10 years ago, I was completely clueless as to what I would do with my career. I spoke to people that told me I have skills in X, Y, and Z. I just didn't see any of it. I was coming from a community where your best bet is to just work for your cousin or your uncle or your friend or your neighbor. Like that was the best way to get a job, and really striving to build something for myself. And it took me years and years and years to believe that I could be something. Like deep in my heart, I felt like I had something that was special, but the validation you need early in your career, unfortunately or fortunately, comes from the right company hiring you. And it took me so many years to kind of like, I remember talking to my wife when we started dating in 2016. I remember saying like, I just need one company to say yes. And I was thinking about it then. It was like, yeah, no shit. But like, that's the hardest part, right? Like, why would somebody say yes if they see that you have no credibility, you have no background, you're not even getting through it to like through HR at that point. And I realized like my only way to break in was finding that third door, connecting somehow, which I hated, still do hate networking. So like trying to find a way to connect to the right person, not to everyone until I find that right person. But if I were to tell myself anything, it would be you only need one person to say yes. The job at Nugs followed by the job at OLIPOP, like those two jobs changed my life. Everything after that was due to the credibility I had by that one company saying yes. And I tell myself, like, be patient because you only need one yes.
It's incredible how that is so much of life. It's finding your first investor. It is getting that first opportunity. Maybe any last minute tips there on how do you separate your self-worth from that, right? Because so much of it is fit and it's not, how do you keep going?
It's brutal. It's brutal. I think there were weeks, and my wife can definitely attest to that. There were weeks or months that I thought there's no way. I mean, we started dating. She was a double major, going to college for biology and international relations. I was a high school dropout. There were so many times where I said, like, I don't even know how this plays out. And I think understanding that for me, it was a lot of empathy for the HR team. Like and I saw that later in my career when I was hiring, is like the first thing you want to do when you have 900 resumes is get rid of 99%. And the easiest way to get rid of 99% is say like, okay, these people have nothing special. They have no credibility. Like the easiest way to know somebody's credible is, were they hired by Airbnb?
Yeah.
Did they work at Google? Did they work at whatever, like Allbirds, Glossier? Like those are the credibility pointers. And I get it. Like, I think I get it now. And I tried to get it then. It's like, they're just doing their job. And for them to understand something that they would have no way of seeing is an impossible ask. And you just have to figure out a side door. So like somehow try to connect with somebody that's working there, try to connect with the founder, try to connect with the hiring manager, try to make a connection that's not your resume.
Absolutely. Easier said than done, but I appreciate the perspective on that. Okay, so now you're at Yotpo, tons of awesome, exciting work there. You're also running your newsletter on the site. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of that and the motivation and the goal and the mission.
The newsletter came from me realizing that I loved sharing what I was learning, but I hated leaving my house. Like I just, this was 22. So this was not a COVID thing. I just, like, I hated networking, but I loved sharing what I was learning. And I would consistently get asked like, hey, can you do a consulting call? Can you do a networking call? And I said, like, if people just want to learn about the things that I'm sharing, about the things that I'm learning, I consulted with like 90 plus brands from 2020 to 2023. And I was just like, I want to share what I'm learning. I want to share what I'm learning from the people I spoke to. And I basically said, what if I can just share from this corner of the room, type a weekly newsletter, send it, and have people enjoy it? It started 2 years ago, and it thankfully landed as well as I thought it would. I'd say it landed a lot better than I thought it would.
Yeah.
and it's changed my life.
Target consumer for your newsletter?
I mean, it's targeted at anyone that's like an operator that's adjacent to CX or retention. So anyone that kind of understands the world that I'm talking about or has interest. Like I would say I have people that work in the FDA and the CDC that read my newsletter, going to like General Mills and, you know, OLIPOP, right? So there's a very, very wide gamut, but mostly people that care about the topics like CX and retention.
All things CX and retention. That makes a ton of sense. And yes, that's a lot of reach from not leaving your house.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Super, super cool. So maybe a couple of wrap ups here. Gosh, this lunch half hour is going by super, super, super quickly. Two sort of fun questions. Every week we do a rolling question of the week from our previous guests, in this case, Jessica Schulte from Javi Coffee. And maybe thinking back to some of your direct operational days, Eli, what do you think has set your leadership style apart from others in the CX and retention industry?
Oh my gosh. I love this question. I spent most of my career being afraid of my boss. And this is a very, very like deep topic that people love arguing about. You should be scared, you should be afraid, you should love, you should admire, kind of like leadership style. For me, I felt like I worked best with people that I felt like they supported me and they got me and they just would do whatever it takes to help me win. And as a leader, I think maybe I'm too well liked. I've gotten feedback that like I'm too nice, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm good taking that to the grave. But I've tried very hard to make these people feel like I have their back in a meaningful way. And I found, especially in CX, I always had incredibly performing teams because they understood, they were inspired by how deeply I cared about the work. And I tried to pass along. I tried to be more of an inspirational boss than a scary boss. Like, look how deeply I care about CX and look at the experiences I can create. Do you want to jump in and work with me?
I love that. It's building that team and mission across everyone that works together and with you. Cool. Yeah. Now, sort of a bonus question that I'm just very curious about. Out of all of your travels, what's your favorite place? Where'd you go back?
So I love the underrated ones. Like I love the ones that don't get enough credit. So a few of those will say Belgrade, Serbia, incredible people, delicious food, kind people, culturally so kind and friendly. Loved Serbia. Two of my other kind of favorite, again, maybe moderately rated, like it's not a Paris and a Rome, but plenty of people know about it, is Hungary and Prague. Both of those cities are just incredible. People are so kind. The food is great. The vibe is great. And then they're kind of like the ones that you believe me on. Bali, which again, Bali has changed over the last couple of years, but when I went in 2017, it was lovely. Yeah. And then, I'd say those few are like my top. Amsterdam, like I'd go there for a month or 2 months any day of the year. Tel Aviv is one of the greatest cities in the world. I mean, like, just if you're not rich, avoid Paris and Rome, because the pictures you're seeing are from people that are very wealthy, living a very different experience than you probably will. So just save your money and go to Prague.
Wow. And Belgrade, I've never checked that out. That's got to be on the list.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Eli, we're coming towards the end here. But for our CX leader for next Plain Speak, is there anything that you'd love for them to answer? It could be a fun question, a CX question. What comes to mind?
What do you do when your team is just really exhausted and overwhelmed and not feeling inspired? How do you get them wired?
How do you get them wired? Great question going into Q3, Q4 2024. Eli, thank you so much for joining us. Super appreciate all of your experience from DDC and all of the awesome talk through all of your journey into CX. And folks, if you're listening along and you want to know about all things CX and retention, please do check out Eli's newsletter. And Eli, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Wednesday, everyone.
Thank you, Liz.